Hey, welcome back to the second video of the day. If you did miss the first one, it is basically the same as this, but for players that aren't on a budget. Talk more about that in a second. This video is going to go over budget decks that I think will be good for the release of Lorcana, which is in a week's time, or a bit longer, but around a week. And I will start this video off by saying that this is solely a prediction-based video. I do not know what is cheap, I do not know what is good. However, I have come up with my best educated guess on what will be cheap and what will be strong going into the release. So I'll just jump right into it. Like I said, if you missed the last video, it's the meta decks for day 1. There'll be a link to that and every deck list and a video for a guide for each deck in this video and the other video. If there isn't a deck list out already or a deck guide out already, there will be very soon, so subscribe, make sure you're very tuned for that if you're looking forward to a certain deck in particular. Statistically, 92% aren't subscribed to the channel, which is totally fine. Just thought I'd throw a number out there in case you did want to subscribe so you don't miss any of this future content. There's a lot more coming, especially since the release is very, very soon. I'll have a lot more videos coming out and a lot more higher content videos, a lot more high quality videos as well. I'm very new to YouTube and I'm trying very hard, blah blah blah, no one cares. Let's get straight into the video. Budget breakdown. Every deck in this video will have 2 super rares and no legendaries. The reason for this is in the subreddit someone posted a booster box breakdown. Obviously this is a very small sample size, but from this one booster box in general, we can see that they got 12 super rares in a booster box, and if you don't know, you get 24 packs in a booster box. So we can kind of deduct that you should, in theory, get 1 super rare every 2 packs. And if you think how many people are going to be opening packs, selling the cards they get from those packs, or trading the cards they get from those packs, there's going to be a lot of super rares in circulation. So I think 2 super rares is a good number. That will be cheap enough for budget players to be like, yep, I want to invest a little bit into this game, see if it's for me, and then maybe if I enjoy this deck, I can upgrade it, buy some more legendaries, buy some super rares. So that's kind of my justification for 2 super rares and the budget keyword, basically. So deck 1, we got villains. This is a very anticipated deck for myself in the budget category. You basically want to use the boss card Hades to shift later on in the game and do like a massive, not one shot, but a massive closeout turn where you quest for like 10 in one go. I'm very much looking forward to this deck, and I think it's a mid-range deck. It's definitely more like aggro mid-range, but I'd say more mid-range just because your card is 8 cost, and it's hard to say that a deck that wants to have an 8 cost card as a finisher is an aggro deck. So I've put the word mid-range. This is a deck list I've come up with. Basically, you have a lot of early game units that can quest for a lot. You have the Pascals, which are evasive, and then basically just a lot of cards with the villain keyword. Your super rare for this deck is Rockstar Stitch, which is a fantastic card, and if you definitely enjoy this deck, then you can definitely up that to 4. It's definitely a lot there. Yeah, we've also got cards like Rafiki, which is really good for rushing, really good surprise factor. This deck has a lot of surprise factor in it. Just because people might not know early on what the Hades card does, and it can quest for a lot in one go. So we'll talk about the smaller Hades first. Basically, the smaller Hades can loop itself. So what it does is when you play it, you can add a card from your discard pile back to your hand. That includes Hades itself. So if you have 2 Hades, 1 in the discard pile, you can play 1, add the 1 in the discard pile back to your hand. When your 1 on the field dies, you can loop it basically. So you've always got that threat of your 8 cost Hades coming in. So you've also got cards like Friends on the Other Side and Maleficent to draw cards to make sure that you have keep the gas going basically. You want to quest for a lot, and then you kind of want to have this wide board where you have like 4 villains plus Hades, and then you shift into Hades on turn 6, and then you can quest with it straight away. So your Hades that is questing for 1 is suddenly questing for like 5 or 6, and then you have the quest of all the other villains that are already on the board, and that's around 10. So you can just nuke the board basically and just end the game very rapidly. The pros of this deck are definitely a surprise factor. Like I say, you've got the cards that have rush keyword on it, and also people just not really knowing what Hades does, so they might not clear your Hades, or they might clear it once, see that you can loop it and then stop clearing it, and then you can just go for this huge 8 cost Hades and just finish the game very quick. And the other pro is that it's a very explosive start. Cards like Lilo and the 1 cost Maleficent that questing for 2 every turn, protected with a Simba, you're going to be on like 7 quest on like turn 3, which is really close to a point where you can just go wide with the Hades and just like one-shot the whole board. And you've also got the card draw, Friends on the Other Side, stuff like that. So it's very explosive, has a lot of surprise factor. The only con is that, you know, like a lot of your cards are uninkable, so like the Alilos, your Maleficents, and both your Hades are uninkable. So, you know, you might not be able to have the perfect curve every turn, but for a budget deck, I think this would be an absolutely phenomenal choice for anyone starting the game. For deck 2, we've got Sapphire Ruby Ramp. This is actually just a really good deck. I've got a budget list here, but if you want to upgrade this deck, it can definitely compete with the rest. Basically, you just want to use your Sapphire cards to get as much ink as possible, so you can play your big Ruby cards that can clear boards, single target removal, and just big scary units. I do have a video out on this one already, will be in the description and comments. This is the budget deck list I've got. Basically, you want to use your early game cards like Gaston, Donald, to just have like good stats and make sure your opponent's not questing a lot or establishing a very strong board. You want to ramp with Grammatella and Mickey to get to your like key ink, I'd say, is around 5, so you can play on Maui, which is the most overstated, almost, I want to say, broken card. It has Rush and Reckless, so 6-5 on turn 5 can just play it, rush, kill something, it stays on the board, kill another thing while your other units quest, and you can just get to your later stages of the game. We've got Donald, which has the keyword Ward, which is super good. The opponents are playing Dragonfire, which they might do because it comes in the starter deck for Ruby. They can't target the Donald, so it quests for 2, very strong for that. We've got Mufasa and Stitch, which are exactly the same card, just different ink. They both quest for 3 and have good stats. They're surprisingly just really strong. The super rare for this deck is the Aladdin, which does come in the Ruby starter deck as well. So if you play the Ruby starter deck, you have a fair amount of these cards already. And then you already have an Aladdin, so that doesn't mean that you need to buy 1 extra Aladdin. We've also got cards like just Triton, which is just big stats basically. You just want to get to a point where you're playing cards that just have big stats. You have a lot of removal with Let It Go, Be Prepared, Dragonfire. And that is the first pro actually, is that you have a lot of removal. So you can kind of choose if your opponent plays like a big card, which most starter decks only have like 1 big card, and that is what you'll be playing against a lot in the early days. So you can just remove their main card, and then you're just in a very good state from there. Second point I've got is it beats unrefined. What I mean by that is it beats unrefined decks, right? So this deck, in my opinion, should absolutely stomp any starter deck, any deck that is just like a bunch of random cards thrown together, because it has a very easy game plan, which is the third point. It's very simple to play. You just want to get to your big cards and then just control the board from that point on, and you do that very quick, and especially in a format where not many decks are going to be taking advantage of the early game as much, this deck should be very good. The only cons are, so that's Evasives Aggro, which you won't be seeing a lot anyway, and that's missing a lot of key cards. So for these, like, I'd say a standard Ruby ramp list, you do want cards like Hades and Maleficents, things like that. They are like your big like boss monsters, and you don't have them in this deck because you're playing on a budget. But I still think the deck will be fine in an early game format. Next up is Bounce. Posted a video on this yesterday. Like I say, for the other ones, there'll be link in comments and the description. This deck's very fun, and I think someone hit rank 15 with a list very, very similar on Pixelborn, which is where most people are playing online. It's a simulator, which I use on the channel all the time. So this is an aggro deck, definitely. Let's just go straight into the deck list. The super rare card for this is Genie. Genie's really good. It has the evasive keyword, and it can bounce a card back. If you don't know what bounce a card back means, is that you can target an opponent's card and it'll add it back to the hand. So that means you basically waste their whole turn. If they play like a big monster, you bounce it back to your opponent's hand, and then they have to spend that ink again to play it, and they've wasted a turn while you're playing an aggro deck. So every early game turn is very vital. So that's the first pro actually. It wins very quick. You have a lot of cards like the 1 cost Maleficent again, 2 quest for 2 very early. You have cards like Cruella, which bounce cards when they're banished. Flynn, which quests for 2 and also discards cards from the opponent's hand. Once again, you've got that Amethyst card draw with Maleficent and Friends on the other side. You have a lot of bounce cards like Befuddle, which can banish an opposing character with cost 2 or less, which is very good for the early game. Like I say, it's very early game centric. Any early game bounces, any early game turns you can waste for the opponent just gets you really close to that win con. You've got Cheshire Cat, which trades itself when it's banished. You've got a couple of evasives in here, and you've got the Cusco, which is the best budget card in the whole game, in my opinion. It quests for free and it has the ward keyword, which I spoke about earlier, and it trades itself. So basically, when you play it, your opponent can't really do much to clear it before it quests the next turn. So if you can get to a point where you're at like 14 quest points, you only need 2 Cuscos to end the game basically. And it also teaches you kind of when to trade, which is my next pro. It teaches you when to trade and when to quest. And I feel like that's a very important stepping stone for learning this game and becoming good at this game at a competitive level. And my third pro is that the deck's just really fun. There isn't another deck that can bounce cards back to your opponent's hand quite like this one. So it's a very unique concept while still teaching you very good like fundamentals. And I just have a blast playing this deck. You can win on turn 6, or you can like prolong games out and like play like really annoying units. Your opponent has to find like very tricky ways to get around the deck, while your cards kind of just do things themselves. Only cons is that it loses the control. You know, that's kind of the same with any aggro list. But in an early game format, like I keep saying, your opponents aren't going to have these refined lists. They're not going to have these like archetype lists. So you should have an absolute blast with this deck for the first couple of weeks. You should win a lot of tournaments, a lot of games, and just have a lot of fun basically, which is what it's all about really. The last deck in this video is the Evasives. Now, if you know anything about card games, cards that can't be targeted in like combat with other cards tend to be quite annoying to play against. This is definitely an aggro deck. It's Emerald Ruby. This is the list. Quite similar to the last list, with the Super Rebby and Genie again. Just a great card. And the great thing about this deck and the last deck, if you were to buy one of them and you didn't really like it too much, you only have to buy a couple cards to make this list, and they should be quite cheap. Because it's a very Emerald-centric deck, just like the last one. You have a couple of the bounce cards like Cruella, Genie, and Mother Knows Best, but we've surrounded the whole deck in this evasive package. So your opponent needs to use like certain songs or action cards or just target removal to get rid of these evasives, while you're just turning your cards sideways and questing for a lot, and your opponent's panicking while they can't do anything while you're just ending the game. So you've got a very like simple game plan as well, in the fact that you're just turning cards sideways and getting to that 20 quest points. You've also got some you know, I spoke about every card really here, but you know, it's a very simple list as well. Again, first pro is that it's difficult to play against. Evasives tend to be quite difficult to play against. They are quite understated and quite expensive for what they are, but cards like Pongo and Tinkerbell that quest for 2 and have evasive for the cost of 4 are just phenomenal, because they can quest for so much before your opponent has an answer, because they need to have the answer in their deck, draw it, and you know, and use it effectively. And when they clear one, you can just play another one. So they need to use cards like Be Prepared, which is a turn 7 card. So by that point, you've already got really close to the end, and then you can just close it off with Cusco, like we spoke about before. And you should have just like a really easy time winning games with this list. The second pro is that it wins fast. It's very similar to the last deck in the fact that you just play aggro and just turn your cards sideways. And yeah, you should win games very fast, very quickly. Same con as the last one, is that it loses the control. But the same points, like I said for the last one, opponents shouldn't have like refined decks. Or if they do, you know, if you're playing a competitive setting and they have those, then that's fine. You know, you chose to play on a budget, and you should win a lot of games against people that are also on a budget with this list or any other list in this video. So there's no deck guide for this one, but there will be very soon. So if you're interested in that, be sure to subscribe, turn notifications on, stuff like that. But that was it. That was the 4th deck. If you did enjoy it, leave a comment. If you have any suggestions for any other budget decks that you think would be cool, you know, discuss in the comments, help others out and stuff like that, and I'll see you in the next one.